So good morning, and we are going to coming to the next session, and next one is for Mr. Xunchang. He is the PhD student at Reading, and also our Chinese country delegate at ATypI, and he is the multilingual type designer and also the director of a documentary. So he will talk us today about the evolution of a Chinese typeform in the 19th and 20th centuries.
像这个模具，就是我们以前做出来之后，把它每个字放在什么地方，要什么字就在这里面挑出来之后，拿到那个机器上面去做，可以注字，一个一个字做出来之后放在这个架子上面，要什么字可以在这里面挑。它这个都是有规律的，1、2、3、4、5、6、7。像咱们有的电脑上面没有的字，我们这里面键盘字也有，就是像这个里面的。 很难也很少用得到，就是这种字。这个由来是以前这个一个厂都是做的这个铜模具，做这个模具，然后有这个车间做这个教注字的车间，做模子的车间。因为现在用不着了，没有了像这个车间。然后这个还是以前留下来的，就是常用的嘛，要留下来然后放在这里。这些东西很少了，反正也没有什么人会做了。我还是以前。 年轻的时候做，现在做的就是你们要看嘛就来做，不要看就放在这里，这上面灰尘也多，对吧？
Hello everyone around the world. My name is Xunchang Cheng. You can just call me Cheng. The topic of my presentation today is my PhD project, Evolution of Chinese Typeforms in the 19th and 20th centuries. I'm a PhD student supervised by Professor Fiona Ross and Professor Eric Kindle in the Department of Typography and Graphic Communication, University of Reading. Today I'm going to briefly introduce the evolution of Chinese typeforms. The short video you saw was one of my starting point for my research on Chinese type design. That is a documentary I made for my undergraduate work, Huoban, about the first group of Chinese type designers after the establishment of New China. The lady you see used to be a worker for casting Chinese types. She still looks after those casting machines, Chinese metrics, and types at Cenotype Changzhou. Back to my PhD research, my research title was The History of Chinese Type Design in the 19th and 20th centuries. However, type design actually is, although it's a modest but systematic field, especially Chinese type design. In addition, the time scope of my research is 2 centuries, which is a large time scale. So I narrowed down the title to the evolution of Chinese typeforms in the 19th and 20th centuries from the perspective of a type designer to look at the changing of the shape of Chinese characters in different techniques and media. I use the term typeform, which refers to the visual form or shape of Chinese characters in a typeface that reflects the function of reading Chinese and the aesthetic part of Chinese calligraphy. The other precondition that may be helpful is briefly reviewing some aspects of the Chinese types. Usually in letterpress printing, a type is a piece of metal. On one end of its face is a character image. However, because of the particularity of Chinese fonts, I extended the definition of the term type. In my research, actually, type can be made of various materials, such as wood, ceramic, and metal. And there are 2 different types, cut on the blank or saw from wood blocks. And the other one is cutting from matrix. The main difference between these two types is that types cast from matrix can be mass produced. And here is my main research questions. How did Chinese typeform develop in the 19th and 20th centuries? What factors influenced the evolution of Chinese typeforms? What was the development trend of Chinese type design after implementation of Latin-based mechanized printing technology? And regarding the methodology, I based on the approach of one of my supervisors' pioneer research, the printed Bengali character and its evolution, which is applicable to a great variety of scripts typeface development, and I combine that methodology with the characteristic of Chinese characters. And this is my research outline. I have 3 parts. Part 1, a historical and visual analysis of Chinese writing. I need this part because all of my readers of my research actually is English speakers, so I think that is quite necessary to explain clear what is Chinese writing system. And the part 2 is origin and development of Chinese movable type, and part 3 is typeface design in the 20th century. And considering the lack of understanding of Chinese characters by non-native Chinese speakers, part 1 I will give an overview and visualize the Chinese writing system, which is divided into 3 small chapters. Now I'm just briefly go through part 1. And the first chapter is the formation of Chinese characters. This is the earliest form, a known form of Chinese writing system around 1200 BC is Oracle bone script. The bone, this bone actually records that an officer asks the emperor and the general whether we are protected if we attack the other country. Even one calculates from around 1200 BC, Chinese characters still have a history around 3,300 years. During this long period of time, Chinese characters have undergone a series of important changes, both in its structure and the style. After the appearance of Oracle bone script, writing system underwent a kind of transformation process. Before the unification of writing system in Qing dynasty, the structure of Chinese character were really diverse. You can see the list of Oracle bronze inscriptions and seal scripts. The oracles and the bronze inscriptions for birds vary in forms with different the birds has different orientations. They have different postures, and even some birds with many feathers, and where others just being simplified. In this ancient stage, the pictorial forms of most Chinese characters initially resembled pictures, it's kind of pictographs. And for the sake of convenience, the ancients gradually transformed their character into more linear and less pictorial structure. This process may be referred to as kind of linearization. And after the unification of China in the Qing dynasty from 221 BC to 206 BC, Qin Shi Huang standardized and introduced a unified script, small seal script on the right. And the unification of Chinese character could be seen as the formation of Chinese characters. After that, the style of Chinese characters started to be determined. And I think it is really important to note that at the time of the unification of Chinese characters, the character were written on bamboo slice. And the picture is the Shui Hu Di Qin bamboo texts, which are early Chinese characters written on the bamboo sleeves. Before the widespread use of paper around 3rd century, Chinese people mainly wrote Chinese characters on bamboo or wooden sleeves. The bamboo sleeve actually influenced the direction of writing and the habit of reading Chinese characters. You can imagine that when you hold a roll of bamboo sleeves, the most convenient way actually is hold the roll of the sleeves on your left hand and use your right hand to open it. And it's naturally you will find that you will therefore like read the words from top to bottom and right to left. And it also influenced the later Chinese typography, which restricted Chinese character to columns. And that is why traditional Chinese books are arranged from top to bottom and left to right, and right to left, and which inherited the textual arrangement of the bamboo slips. Interesting, actually, the shape of the Chinese characters at this time is restricted in width. And you can see the height of each character is different depending on the complexity of the character. We're also aiming for like even text, like their target maybe is want to achieve kind of even text grayscale. And second chapter of my research is to determination of the standard style of Chinese scripts. After the formation of Chinese characters, the first row is like a bronze inscription and oracles. And the structure has not changed too much, but most like characters totally lost their pictorial features and become symbols, like comprised to like dots and vertical leftward and rightward strokes in order to facilitate writing. This process can be seen as a kind of segmentation of graphs into strokes. With the demand for different writing, the speed of writing increased, and the semi-cursive like script emerged, and with like perfect fit between Chinese people and the Chinese brush, and the Kaiti script formed in the end, and until the Weijing Southern and Northern dynasties, around like 220 AD to 589 AD, when Kaiti style appeared, the standard style of Chinese characters were determined. After that, the style of Chinese character are all based on the Kaiti style. Compared with the evolution of like Chinese and the Latin characters, they all come from like logographs, and then they become more and more abstract, finally developed it into completely different writing systems. And the evolution of Chinese characters actually is a process of standardization and simplification. And for the current like Chinese type design, it can be said like the standard style is still Kaiti script, and the typical Kaiti style also become one of the main text like typeface style. For example, this is a Kaiti typeface made by Xenotype. And my chapter 3, evolution of Chinese characters through the like based on the through woodblock printing. After the determination of the formation and style of the Chinese characters start to change its shape, try to adapt to different media. You can see from here, this is the enlarged version of Diamond Sutra. At this time, I think the calligrapher and the engraver may be the same person, and they also want to engrave the character exactly same as written characters. So they keep the connection between strokes, but we still can see some like tracing of the like engraving feeling. The shape of Chinese characters become like really sharp and stiff. And in the Song Dynasty, calligrapher and engraver, they become different people. And the engraver achieved really high engraving skills, and that we can see from the left figure, the left picture, and the right figure has the same like content. Left and right, they have the same content, but they give people different feeling. Compare them, actually the character on the left is more like complicated and precise, and exactly like looks like a brush, like written style. And the right side is kind of simplified, and the horizontal stroke become like flattened. And because in the Ming Dynasty, engraver actually become, on the right one is from Ming Dynasty, engraver become a kind of profession for the purpose of economy and efficiency. They just reduce the engraving times. Maybe the horizontal stroke on the right, they just engrave 3 times to get the horizontal stroke. But on the left one, they may engrave like, for example, like 5 or 7 times. And for the current Chinese type design, the style of Fang Song Ti was influenced by the Chinese style in the Song Dynasty. For example, this is kind of Fang Song Ti, is a Fang Song Ti typeface, digital typeface. And in the Ming Dynasty, there was the other style appeared. When the engravers, they mainly control the production of books, they further simplify the shape of the Chinese character for their like easy for them to engrave that. So Songti style finally appeared. Like Japanese researchers, they always call it Mincho because this style appeared in the Ming Dynasty. And Chinese people call it Song because it was influenced by the style in the Song Dynasty. So Songti may refer to kind of high quality. That's why they call this kind of kind of style. Anyway, but this is only the naming thing for that. And for the current type design, like Songti is also influenced from the previous Xylography, but they just got influenced by the style phase. But this one just steal the Xylography part. And the part 2 is origin and development of Chinese mobile types. And this chapter, I'm going to briefly just go through the early Chinese mobile types. Woodblock printing actually is it's more convenient than the manuscripts in terms of production, but they still have a lot of disadvantages. And while printing a small number of pages was feasible, but it would take many years to engrave the necessary wood blocks to print the extensive text. The earliest mobile type was not wood or metal, but unacceptably ceramic. This is the evidence of the invention of Bishen's ceramic mobile type, recorded in the Junpo essay written by Shen Kuo. And actually, and also this is 3 different materials. The top one is printed by ceramic type, and the middle one is by the wood type, and the last one is early metal type. Compared with these 3 different material types, actually they give us different feeling. On top one, their horizontal stroke is quite thin, and sometimes they lost some stroke because when they make the ceramic type, they need to bake the type and make it really hard. And the middle, it's a wood mobile type. Actually, it also has been kept some texture of the wood. And the last one is a kind of early Chinese metal type. You can see the strokes become not that evenly, and they just something absorbed by the paper, because at that time, in China, the ink actually cannot adhere to the metal surface, so they get this kind of different texture. And there are also high-quality prints in the early Chinese mobile type printing. For example, this is the largest printing project during the Qing dynasty, was Gujing Tushu Jicheng, and which was printed with mobile copper type between 1723 and 1728. And the next is the Chinese mobile type in Europe. Many of you were at the Imperial Nationale 2 days ago, and I think you may remember these Chinese wood types they have there. And this is the first Chinese font made mobile wood type made in Europe, which is former's 40-point Chinese font. This project started from 1715 and lasted until the 1740s. It was mainly attributed to 3 people. Their name is Zhong Paobignan, or Claudia Huang is a person traveled from China to France, and Fairmont. And this is a specimen of that typeface. And you can see the first character in the 3rd line is a character Guo. It's placed upside down. And there is a former student, Diguans, he mentioned that the model of former Chinese types actually was 写音品字鉴, published in 1677. And his 2 different font sizes were taken from 2 different parts of this book. And there is a researcher from France. Her name is Michela. Her research on Chinese fonts in the Imperial Nationale is really valuable. And she also published a few articles in Chinese. And I read one of her articles in the French Sinology, and she made a comparison of the same character And you can see there are two Chinese characters in the Dictionary of Chinese, French, and Latin in 1813. Shown above is the 学音品字鉴 in 1677. Actually, they are mostly similar. Seems like they are trying to like trace the outline of the Chinese printed Chinese character in the like wood block printing books. And the France were people in France were able to produce Chinese movable type actually because of the appearance of Arcadia Huang, and he mainly involved in the development of first Chinese French lexicon, the first Chinese grammar, and the dissemination of the system of 214 radicals in French. And this factor actually made this seemingly like unfeasible project possible was the appearance of him. And facing such like really huge challenge, European sinologists and typefounders in Europe actually produced many Chinese fonts in the 18th and 19th centuries. And Leo de Rosny listed most of the Chinese fonts that the implementation layer produced according to the size of the type, published in 1854. And there's one person. He's a really famous font cutter, I think, Michel Legrand, one of the most accomplished type founders in France, and made the other attempt to actually create a really brand new way. It's divisible Chinese type. This is his method to do that. And I took this photo from the Chinese collector, and you can see the font is loose, its structure, but it's quite interesting. He used a brand new method. And also in the implementation, they still kept collected the types of that. Actually, the shape of the stroke actually looks really beautiful, but it's really hard for them to control the structure of the characters. The other divider type is a birding font by Bayer House. And compared with Legrand's Paris type, actually, to avoid kind of ill-shaped produced characters in combining separate parts while retaining the principal advantages of divider type for Chinese printing. He giving a large number of characters with a small, numbers of metrics. And the birding fonts actually took a compromise approach by increasing the types with complete characters. Actually, this is a form to see how many divider types and how many full body types. And you can see the birding type actually has more full body types than the Paris type. And also they later improved that. They try to avoid using divider type and make more and more full body types. And also the other interesting thing is the constructed type there's I think it's Gottlob Brixtorf in 1789. And this is quite interesting. Actually, they deconstructed Chinese characters into the stroke level, and they just need to make a small, several pieces of components. Every time they can make a whole character, but it's really complex. It's a good idea, but it's really complex process. And chapter 6, I will just briefly introduce the Chinese movable type in Asian, like missionaries. Actually, not only European sinologists and type founders in Europe in the 18th and 19th century, but also a lot of missionaries who traveled to Asia in the 19th century, produced many Chinese fonts. And he's Josh Marshman. He's the first person who tried using the Western mechanical printing, a mechanical metal type to make Chinese type. And he also got an assistant of John Lawson, an Englishman who really skillful at engraving in wood. They finally actually in the Swampert Mission Prize succeeded in publishing the Gospel of John in 1813. And the other missionary who made Chinese fonts is Robert Morrison. Morrison was the first missionary sent from the London Missionary Society to China and the founder of the Protestant mission to the Chinese. This is his Chinese language a dictionary of the Chinese language. Actually, when he, like from the 1815, actually Morrison and Thoms, they began to produce 13-point and 14-point font for this dictionary to solve the challenge of mixing Chinese and English in the dictionary. Morrison and Thoms actually decided to produce blanks with the same composition and the size as the Latin types for Chinese characters. And then Thoms employed like Chinese assistants to cut the Chinese font on the prepared blanks. And therefore, the Chinese and Latin types can coordinate it and could like a match in the typesetting process. And the other one is Missionary, also sent from the Missionary Society, is Samuel Dyer. But different from, like, unlike Robert Mercer and Joshua Marshman, he has a typography background and that he knows printing, punch cutting, and type founding. And when Dyer achieved success in the experiment of producing Chinese types, he actually began to calculate the Chinese character sets like for kind of complete like Chinese fonts, or at least a font contains sufficient character for missionary operations. To facilitate cutting punches, Dyer further grouped Chinese characters by their structure. And this is one of his fonts, is 24-point, larger font, and 13.5, like a smaller font. And also, like from the 18th century, actually, Westerners spent lots of time and money try to make a lot of Chinese fonts for printing by adopting their typographic method. Although the shape of the Chinese character were imitates those found in Chinese books and or like from Chinese assistants, but the contribution of their works actually is quite kind of invented lots of new methods, new direction to make Chinese fonts. And the American Presbyterian Mission Press also sent a missionary, William Gamble, to China. And he started to, when he involved into the type making process, he started to calculate the relative frequency of Chinese characters. And also he redesigned in Chinese type cases based on the relative frequency of Chinese characters. And by the late 19th century, the arrival of William Gamble, actually he used the electrotyping method to reproduce the fonts used at that time. You can see the list of these types actually is from different missionaries. And he just like collect them together and use for printing. And also when he took Chinese, and also when he go back to the States, and he took Chinese fonts to Japan and taught the metal type printing to Motoki Shuzu. Motoki Shuzu aided and modified Chinese fonts and contributed to the development of modern printing technology in Japan. And also he also developed a type size system for Japanese fonts, which were introduced to China later. And we almost finished chapter 7, Chinese type design in the early 20th century. And after we, at those time, in the 20th century, and China actually, in the period of Republic of China, actually, in the market, the newspaper and also lots of book publisher, they use lots of fonts actually imported from Japan. And actually they are kind of extensively in newspaper and book printing, which was arose kind of national sentiment of Chinese literati of the time, and the development of the font like this is a Hanwen Zhengkai, kind of have the Chinese aesthetics, fully Chinese aesthetics for this. And also the other one is the Juzhen Fangsong typefaces. And also the chapter 7, I just, in my research, just briefly, I will pick up some really interesting ideas from that period. For example, this is the two newspaper. On the left is a newspaper in the 31st December 1954. And the right one is the other is the same like a newspaper, but next day is the first day of 1955. And just one day, they just, like the newspaper publisher, they just changed their vertical, horizontal to the horizontal typesetting, even their titles of the newspaper. And also the introduction of the photo typesetting in China also opened up many possibilities for the form of Chinese characters. And also the other is Moveable, this is comparison. Is on the left is a metal, it's a hot metal type printed like Chinese, like a novel. And on the right is the first laser phototypesetting book. And since then, Chinese character have entered the computer age. And what can we see? Actually, the text on the right is more evenly grayed out, and the strokes are clearer than the left one. And in the computer age, new technologies have fitted the visual imitation in Chinese type design, and Chinese type design has gradually taken on more like freedoms. And as a part of my research, I also cooperate with an exhibition in our department, which is a formal cooperation between the University of Reading and the Central Academy of Fine Arts in Beijing. This is the final exhibition result, and we have a Chinese typewriter. Welcome to our department to, this is a functional one, so you can play with it. And finally, I just want to conclude today's talk with final part of my documentary.
我们下来了。好了吧？行，好了好了。下来了啊。好。走路都不成样子了啊。哎，这样好，对。有意思，有意思。那西安升级结棍，结棍。啊，西安好，西安好，这是西安好。这里那个，我这没得好。我这些没有很多。
Reflects the contribution of my research in passing on the work and the experience of Chinese type designers from the previous generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chen. There's no time for Q&A, but I'm sure he is here, so if you have questions, you can ask him in personal. So thank you very much. We'll have a rest.